Hjertelig velkommen til en ny episode i podcasten Utenfor, men innenfor, levert av Parkinsonforeningen i Oslo og Akershus med Serlin Erlandsen og Edgar Waldmanis som programledere. After a brief intro in Norwegian, we will continue this episode totally in English. Ja, da ønsker vi velkommen til denne ukens episode av Utenfor, men innenfor. Jeg har i lang tid undret meg over hvorfor så få tross alt medlem av Parkinsonforbundet og en av deres lokalforeninger. Og kommet til at det må vi lufte sterkere. Den jeg spør Vint Cerf, utvikleren av internettet. Riktig. Og han har nemlig selv et handicap. Han kraftig døvhørt og derfor avhengig av høreapparater for å fungere i hverdagen. Så derfor han ukens gjest. After this message in Norwegian, the thing is, I've been wondering about why we have relatively so few members in the Parkinson Association with its local divisions in Norway. We reckon there are 12,000 people with the diagnose in Norway. Only 4,000 plus are members of a local PD association. I have invited Dr. Vint Cerf to speak. He's otherwise well known as the father of the internet, the one that actually developed it and launched it back when. And point is, he is also partially disabled. He wears 2 hearing aids to function in his job. And that's why I challenged him on this. And let's roll. Hello, Vint.
Well, good afternoon to you. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and it's just 9 o'clock in the morning and chilly. I suspect it's even more so for you.
It is 3 in the afternoon here because of the time difference, and I'm actually up in the mountains in a place called Beitostølen, which is up in the Norwegian mountains. I'm here for a training program due to my Parkinson's disease. Will be for the next couple of weeks, and it's been down to minus 33 actually.
Oh, wow.
Today it's rather mild. It's only minus 5, 6-ish something.
Well, oh my. Well, I hope that you're well shielded from all the cold. But let's go on now to explore this whole topic of discrimination and
Yes.
assumptions that are made about people with disabilities, which are not, those assumptions are often completely incorrect. And so we should explore that, I think, in this call.
Good. Yes, for our listeners, as I've written to Vint, around 10 million people have Parkinson's disease globally, 12,000 in Norway. However, very few people in high management positions or otherwise publicly recognizable are there. My conclusion is that people fear being discriminated against if they admit to a chronic disease. What is your take on that, Vint?
Well, this is a very common concern. And it's not an unreasonable one. People worry that if they say, I have a chronic condition, the assumption will be that they can't function at 100% or they can't function as well as someone that doesn't have such a condition. And so 2 things happen. Either they are not even considered for various roles and responsibilities because it's assumed without further discussion that they are incapable of fulfilling what the requirements are. And I have to tell you that there's a group in New York that I've been supporting called Lime Connect, lime as in the fruit. But it's all about connecting people with disabilities to jobs. And the whole point that we try to make every year is to run videos having people with disabilities explaining how they overcome some of the challenges. Because often people don't even think to ask or are maybe even afraid to ask, what's your day like? If you're in a wheelchair, how does that work out? What if you have crutches? What if you have only one hand? What if you're hearing impaired like I am? And people are embarrassed and afraid to ask those questions. So what we do is put video contests together, and we have people who have disabilities tell us how they manage their days. What technology did they use? What other tactics have they used in order to make themselves effective? And the reason we want to do that is that most people would be afraid to ask. And so we don't wait for them to ask. We want to tell them. So that's the first most important thing I would say, is that we should overcome the assumption that someone with a chronic condition is somehow incapable of doing things. The second observation I would make, and I'll test this with you, is that a lot of us who have these kinds of conditions don't think of ourselves as being disabled. And I have a hearing problem. I wear hearing aids. That's how I overcome that problem. And I don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I'm disabled. I wake up in the morning knowing I better put my hearing aids on, otherwise it'll be hard to cope with the hearing world. So those are things that I think we need to work on, and the general public often is uneducated when it comes to how people cope with these kinds of challenges.
Exactly. That's what was my take as well. I mean, if I Google for celebrities with Parkinson's disease, since that is my condition and the thing that is closest my mind, if I Google for that, I get the same names: Michael J. Fox, Linda Ronstadt, Alan Alda. Well, the number of patients is growing, and then I would assume that there would have to be a growing list of celebrities as well, especially after a guy like Michael J. Fox has come out as widely as he has. But turns out not to be so. It's the same list that I got 5 years ago. Still the Michael J. Fox, the Linda, and etc. And as you say, people, maybe it starts with ourselves being not so concerned that I have Parkinson's disease or that you are hard of hearing. We should, as you say, wake up in the morning and say, time to get to work.
The interesting thing.
And then challenge our colleagues to do the same, saying, oh, there's Vint coming into the office. How nice.
Well, we talk a lot here at Google about allyship and the idea that you want to common cause with people that have these kinds of challenges. Turns out Alan Alda is a very dear friend of mine. And I've come to know him, perhaps in the last 15 or so years, well after his famous stint in the MASH television series. And he's a role model for many, because he clearly is happy to articulate what the problems are and how he copes with them, and he demonstrates that capability. But we need to educate managers, especially, to understand that because someone has shared a chronic condition or other disability, that they should not make assumptions. Do not make assumptions. So what I tell my engineers and my staff is that you shouldn't press people for disclosure, because some of them worry that any disclosure will be create a deficit for them. But what you can say is there anything I can do to make your work more effective? Make no assumptions about whether they have a disability or not. That question is appropriate for everyone. What can I do to help you make your work more effective? And some of the managers at Google recognize that their operating style is important to their subordinates and to the people they report to. And so some of them have written operating manuals for themselves, and they invite people to go read the operating manual. So, what's the Vint Cerf operating manual? Well, rule number 1, candor counts, be upfront. Don't be afraid to raise, negative problems. If you have a problem, please come with some solutions. I'd appreciate that. And let's figure out which ones make sense. So those are the sorts of things I would encourage in the workplace.
Exactly. That what actually does happen in some cases in Norway is that, as you say, the manager invites the employee to come forward, and then they sit down together and say, well, if you can't cope in 100% position, maybe you can cope in an 80%, meaning you have an extra day off. And in some cases, yes, you would then go down in pay grade, naturally, because you now deliver 4/5, not 5/5 of what you did yesterday. But still, you're there. You're part of the community. You're part of the job network. You're still giving the full 80%. And then we can make a workaround. The challenge is, of course, that someone else has to do the remaining 20%, but often it can be worked out that as well, so that someone else picks up and we are back at the, on average, the full 100% across the workplace. And it works out because, as you say, we are candid about it, we are open, we are creative in finding solutions, and it works.
Well, I'm actually going to push back now on that particular idea. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. That is one form of accommodation.
Oh, absolutely.
To reduce the workload. But there are other kinds of accommodations that allow people to function 100%. It's just that they might not be able to come to the office every single day. Or in the extreme case, they might have to work from home. And of course, during the pandemic, we discovered it's feasible to do that for quite a wide range of jobs. So we use the term accommodation at Google in order to refer to those steps that we can take that will make our employee more effective. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to get a pay reduction or anything. It may just mean, in my case, for example, I might say, well, if I'm going to be in a large group setting, I need to have a headset and better hearing in order to be able to hear everyone. I'm still working 100%. I just needed the extra help of the audio system. So we shouldn't rule out the possibility that an accommodation will allow people to work at 100%, just like everybody else.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's wonderful hearing that you can do this at Google, which is one of the largest companies globally. Which number are you actually?
I don't know where we rank, but we have about 180,000 or so employees. We're small compared to some other organizations like the U.S. Post Office or something like that, or Amazon. I would guess Amazon comes close to being one of the largest companies in terms of total employment, but there are likely Chinese manufacturing companies that might also be, vying for that top position.
Yeah. Well, without discussing sizes, then still with 180,000 employees, you're able to pull this off within Google and accommodate people with the various suggestions and various creative solutions to how to handle the illness that person may have.
Well, there's another angle here that is worth talking about, and it has to do with accessibility of online services. Of course, at Google, we make heavy dependence on online facilities for our work and also for our products that we offer. And one of the things that is quite noticeable is that some user interfaces are not very accessible for someone who's blind, for example, and has to use a screen reader. The web pages need to be interpretable in an easy, straightforward way by the screen reader. And unless the person who designs the web page understands how screen readers work, they may not be able to design a web page that works very well with a screen reader, just to give you an example. Another example is someone with color blindness looking at a chart that uses color only as a way of distinguishing different things may not get the same message that someone with normal vision has. And so we have to remember, some of my viewers may have that problem. Let me make sure that I've used texture or shape or some other distinguishing element in addition to color in order to convey the message intended. And so those sorts of that kind of thinking, accessibility thinking, is really important, not only for the products that we offer, but also for the tools we use internally. And I won't say that we're 100% at this yet, but at least we're conscious of the fact that that's an important element as well to accommodate people with various kinds of disabilities.
Absolutely. And even if, as you say, you're not 100% there, if this is sort of ingrained in the company that, oh, we have to ask every time, is this readable? Does this work with a screen reader? Does this work for a person with color blindness? Does this? And then sometimes I guess it's still you would still say no, but at least you had the question up and do your utmost. And if you can't always reach 100%, at least trying and doing your best is a huge step forward.
Well, this raises one other theme that, if you don't mind, I'm going to harp on a bit. And it has to do with building intuition for what works. And giving someone a list of things that they're supposed to do to make something accessible is better than nothing. But it turns out that seeing examples that don't work and examples that do work are often the best way of building intuition about what makes something accessible. And so I'm always looking for examples of this stuff didn't work and here's why. This stuff did work and here's why. Please look at all these various examples and sort of ingest the intuition so that when you're designing new interfaces, you'll have this in the back of your mind, and that the accessibility will turn out to be better. But learning by doing is a tremendously powerful tool.
Back to the hiring process and job interviews. How do you avoid bias in the interview phase? Saying you have
actually, well, we do several things. First of all, we train our managers. We have training programs. They are required to take these programs to know about accessibility and to know about disabilities and that sort of thing. The second thing is that for the interview process, we also not only train people, but we also ask any candidate whether they need any assistive technology. Do they need captioning? Do they need any other, if they're coming to a face-to-face interview, do they need wheelchair accessible access to the interview? So we ask ahead of time, please let us know what we need to do to accommodate this interview, because we don't want people to be unfairly biased, their treatment to be unfairly biased by these kinds of assumptions.
That is excellent. How many other companies can you name that do the same thing?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I can say that in the U.S., there is this thing called the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was passed over 30 years ago, and it puts a federal mandate on companies that are larger than some size that they must attend to these kinds of questions, that they must accommodate for various kinds of disabilities, and there are penalties for failure. You might not be able to get business from a federal government agency if you don't show that you are accommodating under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So some companies undoubtedly are doing the same things that we are, partly because of that, and partly, frankly, it's in their own best interest. Why the hell would you want to turn away someone with a brilliant mind just because they have to use a wheelchair, or they have to use crutches, or they have only one hand, or some other problem? That doesn't make any good business sense, in my opinion.
No, it is kind of short-sighted, but then we all know that people are unfortunately often short-sighted. But I think this is very refreshing to hear that you're working on this both from a government level and even in large companies like Google, that you actually do work specifically and deliberately was the word I was looking for, in challenging biases and challenging assumptions and inviting people to come on board.
If I could intervene one more time on this whole
Absolutely.
bias, I'm so glad that you chose that term. We have training programs at Google which have to do with exposing hidden bias. And I can tell you, most people, when you talk to them, think they're not biased. They think they don't have any prejudices at all. So we run them through this training program and we ask them a bunch of questions. And we ask sometimes the same question in various different ways. And then at the end, we show them that they have exhibited bias, even if they didn't realize that. And so we try to sensitize people to this concept of hidden bias so that you can mitigate against that. I'll give you another example. In our evaluation of performance and in our performance or in our promotional system at Google, we require that there be a person participating in discussions about performance evaluation and promotion who is there specifically to make sure that the biases, if there are any, are exposed. They're responsible for saying, wait a minute, this is what I just heard, and that's an indication of bias, and we should take that into account. So we really try hard. I don't want to argue that we're successful all the time, but the company has recognized exactly what you pointed out, which is some biases are hidden, and they're not even recognized by the people who are biased.
Exactly. Yes, because as I said, we have an estimated 12,000 people with Parkinson's in Norway, and only 4,000 are members of a local Parkinson's disease association.
Yeah, that's pretty good representation.
And that means the remaining 8,000 are hiding out somewhere.
True. Yes.
And that worries me. Well, with the members association, which is voluntarily to be part of, you don't need to do so because there's nothing like a paycheck isn't hanging on a membership or whatever. Mm-hmm. But still, 8,000 hiding out of 12,000 is 60%, 2/3.
Well, I'm looking at this as the half is, 1/3 full or something. It also occurs to me there may be some people who have joined this association who don't have Parkinson's, but would care about it. Maybe they have a family member. Maybe they want to learn more about it. Maybe they think they might get it someday and they want to be, prepared. So you may have members that don't have the disease, but have some association with it.
Absolutely. Well, they are actually counted. In addition, we have membership which is for spouses, next of kin,
I see,
life partner, and we also have what we call support members, that could be your colleague or your cousin or whoever, and then the numbers come up to about 6,000 paying members, which is still only equal to half of the 12,000 population.
This is true.
If we could, as you say, work this into the work life, first and foremost, that we can still function even if we have Parkinson's disease, and some of us shake and some have lost part of their voice, some are a bit stiff, etc., etc. There are like 10, 11, 12 major sort of symptoms of Parkinson's. And if we can say, well, no worries, you can still function in the workplace, you can still do this, and this, and we're not worried if you shake a little or if your smelling is impaired or whatever, because it has nothing to do with the job.
Well, unless you're a wine taster, in which case smelling is kind of
caught me out of that one.
Smells okay to me. Let's talk for a moment about stigma, because sometimes disabilities are associated with a kind of inability to perform, and there's a stigma associated with it. We need to erase that as much as we can. Here's an interesting story. My wife is deaf. She has 2 cochlear implants. She used to wear a hearing aid, but it didn't do much good. I wear 2 hearing aids. But in any case, we showed up at the White House once for an event. And there's, of course, a lot of security there. And my wife thought that everybody in the Secret Service was deaf because they had these little things stuck in their ears. And of course, that was their communication system. But what I would observe now is with ear pods or whatever the hell they're called, everybody looks like they're wearing a hearing aid. And so wearing a hearing aid doesn't have the stigma that it used to have because it looks like everybody's wearing one.
It does. It does. I don't know if you can see on the camera. I have a yellow bracelet here.
Oh, yes, shaken, not stirred. That's so funny. Yes, that's great. I was going to ask you about that. That's really great. Does that mean when they ask what's your name, you say Bond, James Bond?
Almost. There are actually some airports worldwide where they let you in on the fast track with this bracelet because you've then proven that you can't walk the extra half mile zigzagging through the long way to the airport security, and they let you in on the fast track.
That's wonderful. And it makes good sense because people with some of these kinds of conditions are really not able to stand there for very long periods of time. Understood.
Exactly. We're nearing the end of this podcast episode. It was wonderful having you as our guest of the week. A kind of open mic towards the end. Is there anything else you would like to speak about today that we haven't covered?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for even letting me on the show. And so I appreciate that very much. And second, I like the fact that you and your colleagues are so upfront about the condition and don't hide that and want others to understand that this condition is not totally disabling. And we need to translate that observation and the actions of this particular organization into a similar understanding for other kinds of disabilities. And to remember that accommodation often turns out to be the tactic that makes people even more effective than they would otherwise be. So your work and the work of your organization is very important, not only in Norway, but in the rest of the world as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I was also hoping, I could have asked a number of guests, and then I was a little cheekier and said, well, just maybe I could get the father of the internet to come on board and speak because he has a hearing problem as well, and maybe I could reach out. And many thanks again for coming forward yourself about your condition and the way you work around it, and the way you evangelize within your company to avoid other biases for other illnesses. So it's been great having you on board today. One final question we have for our guest of the week, partially as a fun thing. Who would you like to invite for dinner and where? Totally free.
Oh my, interesting. And does that mean somebody who is alive or somebody who, because, Isaac Newton would be a very interesting person to dinner with, or Einstein for that matter. Whenever I think about that question, I think about people whose work I have deep respect for and whose management skills I have a great deal of respect for. And so one person who is a friend and with whom I have had dinners from time to time is Eric, former CEO of Google. But I so admire his capability to deal with a very, very diverse set of incredibly smart people. And he manages to make them all feel welcome and also productive.
So that's Eric Schmidt. But you said you already have had several dinners with him.
I have. I guess if the question is only answered by about someone I've not had dinner with.
Oh, that would be 2 people on the planet or something. The way you've traveled and met everyone on the globe.
Well, I'll admit to great curiosity to meet the now current King of England. I met his mother, but I have not met him, and I would be very interested to have such an opportunity.
That was interesting.
I think the reason is I'm very curious about his perspective on the world.
Absolutely, he's very outspoken on that, and I'm also curious to hear more from him on that. Where would you invite him to?
Well, I would probably, if he happens to be here in the U.S., I would invite him to one of my favorite restaurants, which is called 2941. It's run by a former engineer who was the founder of UUNet, one of the first commercial internet companies. He now runs a restaurant and is in the real estate business, but he has a very good French chef. And to the extent that King Charles likes the sort of modern French cuisine, that's where I would go.
Excellent stuff. Again, many thanks for being with us today, and have a great day onwards in Washington.
Thank you so much, Edgar, and good luck with the program you're in today. I look forward to seeing you, as always, on the net.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Da takker vi for oss I denne episoden av podcasten Utenfor, men innenfor, produsert levert av Parkinsonforeningen I Oslo Akershus med Serelin Erlandsen og Edgar Waldmanis som programledere.